We're sitting at 460 on the 10-year this morning. We were down at about 457 earlier this morning. I'll quickly get through some data to kind of explain what's going on. This thing looks to me like a little bit of a dead cat bounce, but I don't know if I'd rely on these lower rates yet, but time will tell as we get through the deck here today. So
Time will tell. And Brian has all the data for you guys this morning, you guys. And that's part of the big part of this call, right? And he's going to tell you kind of how to use it, what to expect, and all those things. We're going to go over the agenda items here in just one more second, actually. So on your mark, Brian, we'll get started.
okay, I'm ready to go. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Welcome, everybody, to the Weekly Roadmap call. My name is Maria Elena James. I'm the executive producer of the Weekly Roadmap and also your moderator throughout this call. Today is Friday, January 17th, and here are the agenda items for this day. I'm going to go over some quick community things that we offer here at Weekly Roadmap. If you are new to this call, I'm going to go over those things here in just a second. Brian has a market update for you guys. So a big part of this call is Brian collects all this data for you guys. He tells you what happened. He's not forecasting rates. He never does that, but he is going to talk about how you use all this data, right? We're going to give you this deck and all the charts that he shares are for your use. Please type in the chat any questions that you have for Brian in regards to the market update. He's also going to give you some personal development. And of course, we also always have some sales strategies. And today we have a fabulous guest speaker, and we're so excited for him to join us. Randell Gillespie is here with us today. Again, questions in the chat, raise your hand, all these ways that you can interact during this live call. We are so excited for some upcoming speakers again, guys. Make this a note on your calendars. Next Friday, we have Shant Banasian. He is going to be with us during this call at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern. On Friday, February 7th, make a note on this on your calendar. Todd Duncan is going to be with us, and he's here on the call this morning as well. Welcome, Todd. Thank you for being here with us. And then on Friday, February 14th, Valentine's Day, we're going to have Tiffany Rose. If you missed Tiffany last year, she's going to come back with us this year, and you don't want to miss any of these upcoming speakers. So at this time, I believe that's the end of my slides, and I want to, oh, no, I have one more. So Weekly Roadmap, if you're new to the call, thank you for joining us. This is all about community led by Brian Hale, your call leader. We have fabulous guest speakers. We have content. We have newsletter that publishes every single Friday. We have coaching by way of these calls. We have an app. So if you're a member, download the app. If you're not a member, become a member first. That's step number one. Step number two is download the app because you're going to get all the notifications through the app. And that way you can stay in touch to what we're doing here at Weekly Roadmap. Once you become a member, I do site tours every single Thursdays at 9 a.m. Pacific. It's just for 30 minutes. This is me helping you navigate through the site, what features it has, what tips and tricks and all those kind of things, and how you can take full advantage of your platform. With that said, I do want to turn the call over to Brian, who's going to go over all the market update for you this week. Over to you,
Well,
Brian.
thank you, Maria Elena, and welcome everybody. I hope you're having a good week and a good Friday. Obviously, it's always good to finish a week with improved rates, although they're nowhere near what we need to really jumpstart this market. So just a quick comment on the upcoming speakers. Maria Elena mentioned next Friday we have Shant Banasian, the number one originator in the industry. I've gotten to know Shant over the last couple of years. Fabulous guy, great speaker. Going to talk about how he built his business, right? And remember, this is a guy who's doing more than $1 billion a year, licensed in all 50 states, as a great team. He's just going to talk about kind of how he builds his business, how he manages his team. It should be a fabulous session, so you're going to want to be there as well. Randell today and Todd Duncan next on the 7th of February. I'm going to do a series of mindset presentations of folks coming in to talk about how to kind of prepare yourself for 2025. Let's be honest, we've been through 2.5 very difficult years in the business over the last 2.5 years. I think that 2025 is not going to be any easier, materially easier, especially the first half of this year. I think it's going to be as difficult, maybe a little more difficult than last year. I don't know. I just don't see a lot of rate relief coming anytime soon. And so I've got a series of speakers lined up. We'll be publishing them all here shortly as we get the dates locked in, of CEOs, heads of production, top producers, folks like Todd, Dave Savage, others to come in and talk about how to prepare yourself, how to think through this. A lot of this, man, it's the 6 inches between your ears that really matter in terms of your success. And I'm gonna try to expose you to very many different thoughts and approaches. And along with those mindset conversations, having some specific tactics that you can then deploy immediately as you get off the call. So we're going to try to help you kind of mentally as well as with tactics in this process. And we're ecstatic to have Sean and Todd and Tiffany lined up. Tiffany does a phenomenal job of helping you understand how to use social media to materially broaden the top of your referral funnel and to convert more leads through that process. And she's been a top producer in the industry for many years. Now does training through Tiffany Rose Training, and she's an excellent presenter. So I'm looking forward to having Tiffany back as well through this process. So this past week, we had a couple of big numbers. We had the core PPI, the wholesale numbers, the producer price index that actually came in well better than forecast at 0%, meaning that wholesale prices came in unchanged, which is really much better than expectation. The year over year was not as much better, but still better than expectation. And then on Wednesday, we got consumer prices at the retail level, core consumer prices. And when we say core, we're talking about excluding housing, food, and fuel, right? Gas prices, as because those items are really volatile. That came in at expectation, but some of the sub numbers were much better than expected. Weekly jobless claims have begun to climb back up a little bit, right? Which suggests maybe a little bit of a slowing of the job market. And then we got housing starts this morning that came in super strong, over 200,000 starts higher than last month, which gives a sense that the home builders are feeling a little more bullish moving into 25. Next week on Monday, there's not going to be any data. It's both Martin Luther King Day and it's Inauguration Day. So there's markets are closed. There's no data. Tuesday, there's nothing really material that's coming out. Wednesday will be the MBA application indexes. Thursday will be the weekly jobless claims. And Friday, you're going to get existing home sales and the S&P Global Services PMI, the Purchasing Manager Index for global services, which is really the section of the economy that we all live in the mortgage space. So we've had a couple of great days of gains in terms of interest rates. Things have improved. We've come back off the highs, certainly of the year, and the highs of the last 3 or 4 months have retarded back a little bit. We saw that, as I mentioned, we saw housing starts come in really strong this morning. That's good for inventory. It's good for future opportunity. What's going to be really interesting, if for those of you who've been following these fires, here in the LA area, and I've had a lot of emails and text, people checking in on me and my family. We're actually fortunately about 45 minutes south of those fires, so nothing that's really impacted us other than I have friends and acquaintances who've both been evacuated and or some who've lost everything in this process. I'm not making a pitch. My wife and I are going to make a donation to the Red Cross here in LA as a contribution. There's a lot of families that have really been, it's hard to describe unless you go there to see the devastation that's happened. What's going to be interesting, this is the largest county in the United States, the most populous county in the United States. And we're going to lose, by the time these fires are over, we're going to lose 15 to 20,000 homes. And communities have just been wiped out. The businesses are gone. The schools are gone. The churches and synagogues are gone. Your local dry cleaner's gone. The gas station's gone. And so, God forbid, for the folks whose houses survived, you're living in what looks like a war zone. This is going to be a 5 to 10 year rebuild. So it's going to be interesting to see how this begins to impact housing starts. The price of housing in LA and Southern California, I will assure you, is going up. We just took 15 or 20,000 homes off the market. There's an immense press for rentals and Airbnb and other kinds of things now. You've got to rehouse 100,000 people in a market where there was no housing available to begin with. So to the degree you're so inclined, find a good charity of your choice and make a contribution. People here need it. I'm going to be doing it. Pam and I are doing it through our philanthropic trust, and those folks need it. So the 10-year Treasury, as you know, since the Fed's first rate cut has gone nowhere but up, except for This week, we had a couple, as I mentioned, a couple of good numbers that were positive for interest rates. And also Governor Waller from the Federal Reserve Board came out midweek as he saw some of these consumer numbers and retail sales numbers and made some positive comments that if inflation improvements continue, he can see the Fed moving back to multiple cuts this year. We'll see. The cuts we've had haven't really helped, as you can tell from this chart. Mortgage rates obviously are up materially since the cut as well, and we're actually a little bit lower than the highs of the last couple of years, but we're nowhere near where we need to be to really jumpstart this market. One of the things I've talked about in the past is the spread. 30-year mortgage interest rates trade at a spread above the 10-year Treasury. When that spread, which today is north of 3 points, north of 300 basis points, and if you look on this chart over on the right-hand side, you can see over the last couple of years, during the pandemic, this was trading at record lows of the spreads. They were down at 1.25%, 125 basis points over the 10-year Treasury. We're now back up almost 300 points over. If you look at the green line on this chart, the little green line that goes across, that gives you a sense of what the average spread is, which is about 150 to 175 basis points. If we were at the average spread today, interest rates would be more than 100 basis points lower than they are today. So here's the good news. Buried beneath this, this is really a function of bond buyers being very nervous because there's a lot of uncertainty. So they're asking for more yield, more juice as a result of that uncertainty. We have a new administration coming, talking about some policies that could be inflationary. So the spreads are really up. To the degree that spreads begin to come back and things become more certain, we should see improved mortgage rates, even if the 10-year doesn't materially improve over time. So I just wanted to put this chart back up. We haven't talked about this for a couple of weeks, and just give you a sense of where we're sitting today, and it explains why your rates are as high as they are. We saw a rebound last week in mortgage apps, both on the purchase side, on the left-hand side, and on refinances. There are refinance opportunities in this market. I've talked about it for the last couple of weeks. Debt consolidation, record high consumer credit, record high credit cards, record high auto loans. Those interest rates are between 12 and 32%. You can do a great consolidation, but it takes getting on the phone, doing a consultative conversation with your past customers and helping them understand whether you can put them in a better position overall in terms of outlay per month through a debt consult. The other thing that's been available now, people aren't moving. We know that, but they are improving their house. So home improvement, if you have an equity product, could be a play, or cash out refis for a home improvement. You can tell on the app side, on the purchase app side, everybody's back from vacation. I mentioned this last week. As long as I've been running companies in this industry, somewhere between December 15th and January 15th, the whole industry, real estate, mortgage, title, goes on vacation. Everybody's back, and you can see the impact on purchase apps and refi apps last week. We saw a huge jump in the indexes, whether those hold or not, or whether that was pent-up demand. I mentioned earlier the producer price index, the core index came in. You can see the trend line over the last 12 months has been down. So prices at the wholesale level continue to moderate. That should flow through to retail and the consumer price index soon. The core consumer price index showed a much better number than was expected. So that's positive. The annual year over year index also is down and has trended down materially over the last 12 months. These are all positive numbers for better rates in the future, but here's a negative. I've talked about this over the last couple of months. Crude oil prices. And I picked West Texas Intermediate crude just as a price indicator, almost $80 a barrel, where it had been trading just a couple months ago at about $67 a barrel. Oil prices impact everything. And right now, oil prices continue to be up. We hope that some of the settlements between Israel and Hamas and kind of a lessening of some of the tone in the Middle East should have a positive impact on oil prices. But right now, oil traders are trading this price up. This is a negative, a contraindicator to interest rates as West Texas Intermediate crude continues to climb. We saw a little bit of it come back last week, but it's up materially. Initial jobless claims, people losing their jobs. You can see the trend line since about July of last year has been down. We saw it pop back up. It had really dropped materially, meaning fewer and fewer people were losing their jobs, which generally is a positive, but it's not a positive for interest rates. So the jobs market continues to be pretty strong. We saw U.S. retail sales come back a little bit for December, a little less than expected, positive for inflation, negative for the economy. We're seeing some moderating, and you can see I've got all the commentary in these slides. So a couple of quick takeaways here, and I'll get you some additional data in a second. We've lost about 100 basis points in rate since the beginning of the Fed move. There's still a play out there for buy now and perhaps refi later. That's clearly out there. Rates could still move up. So I'm a little cautious in terms of this improvement in rates. There are a number of indicators that would suggest higher rates in the market. Clearly, the Fed is on pause right now. You want to continue to watch anything that drives inflation. Unemployment rate and the crude oil prices are keys to this. We're going to see an unemployment and jobs number on the first Friday of February. That number will come out. That'll be an important number for the spring buying season. Jobs have slowed, but we saw a rebound basically October through February. Jobless claims are lowering. It's interesting to see how all of that goes. I still continue to suggest to people are not using video text and video conversations with their past customers and their book well enough. Look, I have more and more using video text. I was texting with my good friend Todd Duncan the other day. We were both using video text, a very efficient way to communicate with people and impactful. That's the key. It's impactful. So if you're not doing this, I encourage you to practice. You can put a couple of these things in the can, put them out to your past customers, your current customers, your referral partners, whatever the case may be, and tell them you can give them a quick update to bring them up to speed on what's going on in the marketplace. It doesn't have to be long. You don't have to be a pro. In fact, I think the more it looks a little bit like you're not a pro at doing video text, I think the more impactful they are with your referral network and with your past customers. So please think through this and get out there and do it. You'll find some real value. A couple of additional data points before I bring up Randell. U.S. housing starts have been falling. We saw a little bit of a rebound here for December. I hope that holds, but this gives you a little bit of a sense of the longer term trend over the last number of years. It's been interesting, obviously, as rates have been up. We've seen housing starts diminish. The builders get less bullish in their view. Had an opportunity to talk to a builder last week. It's a difficult business to be in the building business today, because you think about it, when you're buying land today as a builder, you're buying land to begin to do selling on that land 3 years from now. So that's it's a pretty amazing bet that builders make all the time. And so we don't have enough inventory. Builders can help us with it. This slide gives you a little sense of housing inventory versus the pre-pandemic levels. This comes out from Resi Club. It's a great little graphic release, and I know we have people on from all over the country. This gives you a little sense of how inventory is looking. We're finally seeing some inventory in the Floridas, Texas, Arizona, Scottsdale, some of the upper Northwest markets, some of the Midwest markets. But in many areas, as you can tell, inventory is still well below pre-pandemic levels, and that's driving prices up and continues to drive the cost of housing. This is a slide that I've shown people in the past. I actually have to give John Burns, the economist here in SoCal, credit on this slide. This looks like a busy slide, but what this is telling you is about the future of the mortgage and real estate business. If you look at these colors, each one of the bars on this chart is an age cohort. So I happen to be 69 years old, so I'm way over in the green. I'm a boomer. If you are 36 years old, you're in the red section with the millennials, right? If you take the bottom half of Gen X, all of the millennials, and all of Gen Z, and you add them together, it's 173.5 million buyers, as compared to the baby boomer generation, which drove the economy for many years. That's the generation I'm part of. It's 2.5 times bigger. And as you can see, the age cohort jump up at about 32 years old. A couple of things that are happening. These generations are marrying later. They're having children later. But let me give you a hint. Once they get married, once they have kids, they do what every other generation has done. They go try to buy a house in a great school district. So that little tsunami, that big wave over the top of the millennials, what you should think about that is the tsunami that's coming at you of buyers. And while it's been delayed, when rates begin to improve, you're going to see an immense snapback, in my view, in demand, which will be bad for home prices. I think you'll see home prices continue to go up, but there's going to be immense buying power coming at you. This is a really important demographic chart. You want to make money in life, find a big demographic wave and stand right in front of it and let it wave over you. That's what this chart really represents. Young Americans are moving out and forming families. This is a percentage of 25 to 34-year-olds still living with their parents. You can see that number really increase from 2008 forward. It's now begun to decline year over year materially. As that happens, as they form families, as they have children, they become home buyers. Very good for us. And last but not least, this chart I was going to give you also from John Burns, that bottom green line, American couples today get married later in life than previous generations, as I pointed out. And as you can see, they're delaying getting married to later in life. But as I said, once they do, we see an immense pop up of them having children and moving forward on that basis. So, a couple of just personal development pieces: how to avoid being a T Rex and going extinct. Here's 10 habits from Matt Gray. I love this guy's work. 10 habits that changed his life. I'm not going to read through these, but I give them to you guys in the deck. You should read through them and pick one or two of these if you're not doing it to try to improve. Things like a morning routine. About 7 or 8 months ago, I changed my morning routine. I am now 5 to 6 days a week in the gym by 5:15 in the morning. I'm in the gym for an hour and a half to 2 hours on the bike and doing some weights. I've lost about 55 pounds. I feel better. I'm maybe in the best shape I've been in 20 years, which, by the way, only means I still suck in terms of being in shape, but it's just a relative better than I used to be. Saying no by default. How do you manage your time and your calendar? Take a read through these. There's a lot of really great ideas buried in here. And last but not least, I always try to give you 2 slides on personal development. 10 signs that you're emotionally intelligent. Do a little self audit as you read through this and ask yourself, do you reflect these items? And then on the right-hand side is 8 subject line mistakes. This is about how to improve your email or your approach or, to clients or customers or whatever the case may be. Some great work here in this as well. And, again, I'm a shameless copier of other people's work. I just try to find these things and bring them to you guys. So without further ado, let me introduce our speaker for the day. Randell Gillespie and I have known each other for a lot longer than either one of us want to admit. I don't dye my hair, but I probably my hair just doesn't seem to go gray as quickly as others. Thank my dad and my mom for that. But Randell is much younger than I am, although he's got a little gray hair. Randell has been an outstanding leader of salespeople in the mortgage business for as long as I've known him, which has been over 25 years. We've had the great opportunity to work together a couple of different times. Randell today is the chief production officer at Lower. This is the beginning of the series that I talked about of having people come on and talk about mindset and some tactics. So let me bring Randell forward and get him up on stage here with us. I'm going to take the deck down briefly here so we can see Randell and we can have a great conversation. Good morning, Randell. Welcome to the Weekly Roadmap. I'm ecstatic to have you on board, my friend, and it's always great to work with you. So welcome.
Thank you so much, Brian. It's a privilege to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate you participating in both the weekly roadmap and in the series that I want to do about mindset. So I don't want to waste any more time. So let me just ask you, Randell. These are predominantly originators, producing branch managers. Some heads of production are on with us today. If you were in front, I know you do this. I know you do this weekly with your own team. What advice do you have to people? Look, we've just come through 2.5 very difficult years in the mortgage business. We know we've lost somewhere between 100 and 120,000 originators over those last couple of years. I applaud the people that are still here, that are being successful and that have fought through this. We're probably at the precipice of another difficult year, 2025, and particularly the first half of 2025. if you were coaching me or you were coaching some of the folks on the call today about how you mentally prepare to engage for this year, what advice do you have for our audience today?
Thank you for the question, Brian. You know, what's interesting is in my 30 years, this has been the topic all the time, every year anyway.
Right.
I think the very
Even
first
if times were
presentation,
booming, this is the same topic.
exactly.
Go ahead.
The very first presentation I ever gave was actually, I called it PMA, Positive Mental Attitude. It was the very first presentation I was asked to do. Now I've matured it, I think, a little bit, same principles, but I call it Choose Your Fate, FATE. But to your point, I thought it was interesting. I was reflecting back in COVID when everyone was so busy. You know what we were having to do? We were having to have conversations about keeping the right attitude because people were frustrated. Their phones were ringing off the hook. They couldn't take family vacation. They were working 20 hours a day. And we would often say, remember, it can be much different. So the first thing on that FATE is feelings. And I used to say, get over it. I think I probably got that from you. But ultimately, I have found another source that says it really well. Ben Newman, you know, he was the strength and mental coach for the Crimson Tide. And he talks about standard over feelings. I love that. You know, he talks about the standard, and he's got a quote, says, don't complain about the results you don't get for the work you didn't do. And so it's really just right off the bat saying,
is that a
can't be
brilliant
feelings.
quote? I love that kind of stuff.
Exactly right. I knew you would like that. And ultimately, so it goes back really to just understanding the feelings. He talks about the rookie attitude. You got to have a rookie attitude, because what happens is these teams, or a sports team, and you know this, they win a championship and it's so hard to ever repeat that. Why is it? Because you're relying on your past. You don't have that same passion. And so it doesn't matter what you did yesterday or last year. You used to tell us all the time, you start fresh every month. And that's the same thing in this business. So it's just really understanding it can always be worse. And here's the thing too, even in the worst of times, the top 10 originators in our business in 2024 did collectively $5.2 billion. And you've got the number one guy coming on here shortly, Shant, and he's the one who absolutely will talk about it. It's got to be, forget about the feelings, and you're going to get some great information from him. So I would encourage everyone to listen to that. The last point, by the way, I would say is another great speaker, Marco Luttrell, who was a Medal of Honor winner. They did the movie Lone Survivor about him. I had the chance to talk with him, see him present, and think about this. And I've had to do this at times. When he was paralyzed, when he was shot behind enemy lines, he would draw a line in the sand ahead of him. He was laying on the ground. He was paralyzed. He could only drag himself. And for 7 miles, he dragged himself 18 inches at a time. He'd draw a line, drag himself, draw a line, drag himself. So I've talked about that. I've said, so rather than be a lone survivor, LONE, let's be lone survivors, LOAN. But that's the feelings part of the FATE.
So take me to A. So we've got F. Take me to A.
Adapt. It really is simple. Be unstoppable. Bethany Hamilton, had a chance to meet with her a number of years ago. She's the young lady that as a teenager had a shark bite her arm off. She was really into surfing. She wanted to do that for the rest of her life. She, as soon as she could get out of the hospital, was back on a surfboard, but she had to adapt. Her father had to make the surfboard so that she could hold it because of going into and under those waves in order to get out to the big waves. So she had to adapt. And ultimately, her father is the one that helped her do that. And that really takes me to the T of teamwork, because it's like, surround yourself with people who are going to help you adapt, who are going to help you grow from that.
So that's F and A. Let's talk about
FA, and the T is the teamwork. So it's people like yourself, the weekly roadmap, making sure that you got the knowledge. I thought it was interesting. It wasn't that long ago I heard that the root word of capital is actually head, and it's talking about knowledge. And the more knowledge we have, we can adapt. Todd Duncan, I think you're going to have him on your show. He is, I think, on even today. I'm looking across here in my office at a chair I bought after I met him for the first time. I was a young area manager, and he talked about his thinking chair. And so I went out and bought a thinking chair so that I could specifically have a place where I was going to grow and learn. And ultimately it goes back to that whole thing. But there's so many other people. Dave Savage, so appreciated him. Amir Saeed with Go Coaching has become a friend of mine. Appreciate him. Renee Rodriguez. Have a mastermind, have a group of people that are going to help you with your teamwork so that they can provide accountability, help you with your knowledge, and keep you motivated ultimately. That's the F, A, and T of the fate.
Let's talk about E.
Last one is just execute. I know we're going to get into some specific tactics, which I'm a tactical guy. I love strategy, but we have to start ultimately executing. Ultimately, Parkinson's law, says that your work expands to fill the time that you have available. And one of the things that happens when we are too much in feelings and feeling sorry for ourselves and not having the right mental attitude is we're not efficient with our time. And so we've got to understand that and get at it. So the first thing that I tell people to do, just to have something to be active in, and you've already mentioned this, you talked about a self-audit in another way, but audit your social presence as well. Have your friends and family, kind of your wedding list group for all intents and purposes. Who would you invite to your wedding? Have them do a social review for you. What is the perception of you based on that? Do you have social proof? Other things, getting that reciprocity, invest in others is a big thing. We'll talk about that here in a moment. But not only from a teamwork standpoint, you got people investing in you, but when you execute, start with actually investing in other people. Find a brand new realtor that just got into the business and just take them to the side. Find a new loan officer, maybe someone who's even at another company ultimately. Something I did a couple of times in my career, went to the unemployment office and became a mentor for someone who was looking to get a job. And it helped remind me ultimately, number one, of what I did have and appreciate that, but it helped me hone my skill by helping someone else. And you create people then who want to be invested in you ultimately. I got my oldest son, I have a large family. My oldest son, when he was diagnosed with juvenile diabetes, he was only 2 years old. And rather than feeling sorry for ourselves when that happened, we actually started going to other young children who were diagnosed, and he became a mentor to them at the age of 4, 5, 6. And actually it's part of what he does today as a 30-year-old. So it's that executing and investing back in other people. That's the FATE.
You have a lot of great sayings, Randall, and I think you know this. I have a real affinity for great sayings, right? I've got a bunch of them hanging on my walls around me. I look at them. I have a stone that talks about being a leader that sits on my sink. It's been there for 30 years, right? In the process. One of my all-time favorites, and when I was a branch manager early in my career, I got this little plaque that hangs in my office here in Newport still to this day. And it's this great saying that everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die.
Yes.
And the moral of that saying is everybody wants things. Everybody wants success, I think, for the most part. And, success is a very different definition. To me, success is however you define it, right? It could be that, doing $1 billion plus a year is success for Sean. That may not be success for you.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe getting to 20 million a year or 10 million a year is success for you. And that's all good. The key to that, what price are you willing to pay to be successful? And you had that great saying about, don't complain, from the trainer at Alabama, right? Don't complain about the results you don't get from the work you don't put in, right?
That's right.
So when you think about execution, when you think about how do you mentally prepare for this, right? I've had the good fortune in my life, and I'm knocking on some wood here. I haven't had to work since I was 52. I turned 70 years old next year. I'm still working 60 to 80 hours a week because I want to, right? Because I love engaging in this business. I love giving back through the Weekly Roadmap. I run a much bigger consulting business that I'm engaged in. I've closed 4 M&A deals here in the third and fourth quarter of last year. Was on a long call on a huge M&A deal yesterday. I like working with smart people on complicated things and people I like. I have the good fortune now I don't have to work with people I don't like, right? So I get to choose. And I would encourage that to people, by the way. If you're surrounded above you, below you, around you with people you don't care for and you have a hard time dealing with, you're in the wrong place. I'll just tell you that, because it's very hard to be successful. So if you're surrounded by either negative people or folks that you can't seem to relate to. But this whole concept of you have to first decide, what price are you willing to pay to be successful?
That's right.
You ought not bitch about not getting to those levels if you're unwilling to pay that price. And the prices around you. There's a guy sitting here on the call today, and I'm not going to call him out, but we used to work together. He was the top producer when I ran Countrywide. He's been a top producer for years. Unbelievably talented originator, built this unbelievable business. Used to work in a branch where he had people around him where he was doing the original $1 billion a year guy. When he was doing that kind of volume, he had people around him that were doing $10 million a year who all wanted to be like him. The difference being is most were unwilling to pay the price, right? And so you just have to decide in life, what price are you willing to pay? When you work with your sales team, Randell, I know you do this kind of coaching with a lot of folks. How do you personally deal with the folks that, as you maybe get to know them, you know, help them with their business, and you realize they're not executing or paying the price? How do you think about coaching folks around execution or personal accountability about actually going out and doing the kinds of things? You know, we had Joe Massey on, he's been on twice on the Weekly Roadmap. He's a $100 million a year purchase producer in Denver for Kessel. One of the most talented, nicest guys I've ever met, right? He did a month-long vacation in Europe, left, and his team did more of a business while he was gone for a month than they did the month before, right? So you look at that, and he has a very defined approach. All of his courses are up on our community site here at the Weekly Roadmap. You can acquire them. His idea is a $600,000 a year commission idea that any originator. How do I know this? Because I used to do roughly the same thing that Joe does to build his business when I was an originator. I used to close 1,000 loans a year. I had to, because they were $55,000 a piece, right? A long time ago. But the point being is, he described the bike, how to get on the bike, how to pedal the bike, how to drive the bike in excruciating detail. And all you have to do is steal his idea and go implement it. And I think you pick up 600 grand a year, either in additional commissions or in additional commissions to what you're making now. The difference being execution. Because when I first got to know Joe, I said, Joe, why are you willing to give all these ideas away, right, to your competition? He said, because most won't do it. Most won't do it. So how do you deal with that personal accountability, the coaching of folks who you've given them the bike, you've showed them how to get on, you showed them how to pedal the bike, you're willing to be the accountability partner for them? How do you deal with folks who then don't execute? And what advice do you have for our audience today about how to think about that, either with team members that they're overseeing or personally?
Boy, that's a valuable question. There's a meme that I saw recently. I have to send it over to you, and it showed two lines, and it said, those who want change and those who are willing to change. And the only line that people were in was the one who want change. Right. They're just not willing to change.
Right. By the way, I hate change personally, right? You ask my wife, I would go to the same restaurant every Friday night with her and have the exact same entree the rest of my life, because I hate, you know, kind of surprises. I hate paying my money, not getting what I want, you know, kind of thing. But in my professional life, I've had to change. I've had to manage a lot of change. So how do you help people change? How do you get them from one line?
Well, we want, don't you agree? We want the things that change will bring. Yes. Because if we start exercising, an example, we want those things, but we're not willing to then do it. It goes back to it. So a perfect example, probably one of the first guys I took under to coach. This was back in the day. Remember, you take $100,000 bar and you'd put it on a flyer and take it out to agents. And so I was helping a guy do that.
By the way, that's a unique delivery vehicle that came from Todd Duncan.
You know, it probably is what I got. And I even bought the candy bars for this guy. And I told him, I said, hey, I'm going to be back next week. We're going to get together. I got there before he arrived at the office. That probably should have been my first clue. And while I was sitting at his desk doing some things, I reached down to throw something away, and I found about 20 candy bar wrappers that were in that's a true story. And he came in and I just dumped the wrappers on his desk.
I found the problem.
Exactly right. And so I think as leaders, so we don't get burned out, you got to identify those people who truly are willing to invest in themselves. I love to invest in people, but I'm not willing to invest more than what they are willing to invest. And sometimes you got to call it out. You know, that means getting them on an 8 a.m. call, getting them on a 5 p.m. call. Okay, did you execute on the things that we talked about at 8 a.m.? And most of the time people will say, you know what, I don't want to get on the 5 p.m. call. Let's just call it what it is and move on. And ultimately, I think John Maxwell talks about, you have to sometimes promote people someplace else so that it's better for them. He talked about even his brother-in-law who he had to have exit the company in that respect. So back to your question specifically, it is finding those people. Most of the time they're already trying to do something. They already have the effort that is there. Brian, you first promoted me when you came in. We started the area manager roles. I was one of the first 2 area managers in the company. I was already doing the job. I still remember when I was asked about it, I was already helping other branches recruit people. And therefore it seemed natural that I would become an area manager in that group. So you're looking for the people who are already trying to do the things, they're already putting the effort in, and then you're helping them perfect the effort. And that is by strategies, tactics, knowledge, experience, and helping them then deploy that in a more efficient way. Another way of putting it is, if I've got somebody who's not even getting leads in the first place, that's probably the problem. I want to get someone who's already has leads, and I'm going to teach them how to better convert them.
Right. Yeah. We did a session on that, on improving conversion with Jeremy Forcier from Cross Country. Again, all these videos are up on our community site. You can go back and watch them. You can watch them 14 times over. But that whole account, like, me going back to the gym, there was a day in my life when I was really much younger that I was a pretty decent athlete. Then I went to work and I stopped being that. And now my execution partner, my accountability partner, is not getting dead. Right. So
That's right.
That's become very real to me as I've aged out a little bit. And so that was the driver for me was, you know what, I just got to, go back and do the things that I know help. Randall, you had some tactics that you wanted to talk about a little bit. I also like to try to leave people with something they can leave and execute. And we've got them in the deck and they're up on our on our community site. Talk a little bit about some of the topics that you coach your folks on in terms of tactical type approaches.
There's 2 really simple things to start with, and they accomplish a lot of things. If folks pull that up in the deck and they go down halfway, there's a book that I read years ago, Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. And he talks about the things that are required in order to get someone to yes, the psychological needs. It's reciprocity, it's commitment, it's authority, social proof, and so on. So I try to look for those things that help have those things in them so that you're developing trust with a relationship and so on. So right now, what are people looking for? They're looking for lead opportunities. Quite honestly, they're looking to just have conversations, and we've got to continue to spread that net. Technology has allowed us not to change what we do, but how we do it ultimately, so we can do a lot more of it in a bigger sense. So final impressions is what I have called this for years. It's something I did as a top producer myself years ago. And it's really this simple. It's taking all of your closed customers. One of the things that's happening in the age of technology is we are not personally engaged with folks enough in a real meaningful manner. And so the idea is to simply go back at those closed customers. It could be somebody that you closed 2 years ago. It could be somebody that you closed 30 days ago. Ideally, between 30 and 60 days is what I suggest. But you call your closed customer and you specifically use the term, I'd love to do a final impressions review. Would you just give me 10 to 12 minutes? Nobody likes to fill out the evaluations. I hate filling out evaluations. So what you're doing is you're naming it something different. You're getting their attention. And ultimately, they're curious, what does that final impression mean? And the very first question is just simply, would you tell me about anything that I could do better in order to continue to earn your business from yourself and from friends and family? And so you're right away a kind of a soft approach of a referral. You're not saying, hey, is there anything I did wrong? You're saying, is there anything that you would love for me to improve on and do even better? That's the opening questions. There's only 3 questions. The second question is probably most valuable. And what you're doing is you're helping them start to develop a script to refer you. And you simply ask the question, is there any part of the experience that you had with me that particularly stands out that I would want to make sure I continue to do for others? My thought of that is I remember the first time we went to Disney as a family. And when I came back, I remember the first person that asked me, what was it like? And I found that the way that I answered it that first time is the way that I started answering it every time somebody asked me the question, what'd you think of Disney? So if we help people right off the bat, think of the positive. If you don't have this first engagement with folks, they may only remember the 2 days that you didn't call them right back, even though it was a great closing, you beat their expectations and so on. So help them very quickly start to create that scripting in their mind. But here's what's really cool. Here is at the core of it, in my opinion, is then you say, by the way, tell me a little bit about your agent. How do you know them? So now you're getting to know that agent a little bit better. Could be someone that you already are close with it as an agent, but you ask the question, what about the agent? What kind of experience really stood out with them that you find yourself telling others about as you're referring your agent to others? So now you're in a soft way helping make that referral. But if especially that was a first engagement you had with that agent, you may hear your client say, well, actually, I met my agent at a youth soccer, or at a church, or at a local community event, or whatever it might be. So now you're getting to know the agent and something personal about them, and you're including yourself in their circle. So there's real strategy ultimately in psychology to asking that question. And then, of course, a follow-up to that would be, well, thank you so much for those compliments of both myself and the agent. Would you be willing to make a Google review and follow up with a review experience and so on, because we know how critical those are. But then here's what's really super neat is then you follow up and call the agent back, and you call your agent and say, I'd love to give you some feedback about what our recent transaction, our client, what they had to say about you and the experience. That agent will call you back because they want to hear what was said. Now, obviously, before you get off the phone, do ask for a referral and just say, is there anybody that you know that's looking to buy or sell? Not someone that's looking for a loan. Anyone that's looking to buy or sell a home, or someone that's going through a life-changing experience right now. That's another way for refinancing, right? So just 3 easy questions, but it gives you an opportunity to then call that agent.
Randell, okay, you touched on something I just want you to spend a couple more minutes on. The power of scripting.
Yes.
We've got people on the call today. I was watching a couple of comments from Todd, man. He's a big fan of yours. And I think Todd's a fabulous scripter. I do a lot of public speaking. I stole a closing line from Joe Gondolfo, greatest life insurance salesman the U.S. has ever seen.
Exactly.
A video that I watched in 1982, right? And his closing line when he was giving speeches was, unfortunately, I won't have an opportunity to meet and get to know each one of you here today, but I hope through my words we've met. I've used that closing line 700,000 times in front of groups for years. The value of scripting when you're talking to a customer, you touched on a little bit of the refinement. Jeremy Forcier talked about it when he talked about, closing or converting more leads.
Exactly.
The ability to hone and improve your scripting. So you're on automatic. You can push the button, right? And be able to, and the best originators, I see them doing the exact same thing. They have the same flow, the same approach, the same scripting. Why? Because it works. It works,
exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Find what works and do more of it, right? You want to make more money in this business? Find what works and do more of it. And by the way, if you're sitting next to somebody who's way better than you, find out what the hell they're doing and do more of that, right? This is not a complicated business. Thank God, because I'm not the smartest guy who's ever walked the face of the earth. I'm a social criminologist by education who got a shitty third-rate degree from a shitty third-rate college in New York, right? Thank God I found an industry that allowed me to just copy others who were really good, and I worked my ass off. There's a formula. So talk about the value of scripting a little bit, Randell.
Well, it's interesting you say that. If I could say this, it's interesting. Somebody asked the question once in a business group that I was in, and they asked us all, what was the best hamburger we ever had? We went around the room and everyone had a different hamburger. But then they asked, who sells the most hamburgers?
Right.
And it was McDonald's. Why? Because they had a consistent process. And that hit me. And back to your point,
you got two screaming kids in the back seat and you want a Happy Meal? It's not, you're not going to McDonald's because it's the highest quality burger you can find in town. Trying to shut up the two kids in the back with a Happy Meal.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And so when you do that audit, as we were talking earlier, of yourself and your social, do an audit of the process. Are you touching people enough? The whole reason, and you've talked about video, Todd has sent me videos. He is famous for that. Got me to do it more myself ultimately. And so to that point, that's our attempt at trying to make it more social. There's nothing better than actually the personal interaction. But in order to get it scaled, then you are putting it on video. And in fact, that's some of the final additional options you can do here. If you want to put these questions on a video, send it to the client and then ask the client to respond as well. And in fact, ask them permission to post that video.
Yes.
Isn't that a great idea?
What questions do we have, Maria Elena? Do we have any questions in the chat today or hand raisings before we get too late here on the hour?
We don't have any questions. Wow, this session is so good. There's a lot of additional information in the chat from Todd. Todd, thank you so much. But no questions for you guys, not yet.
Great.
One additional strategy, Brian, I could say on that is if you're doing a refinance, ask them who they originally bought the home from, then go back to that same series and then call that realtor. That's a way to introduce yourself. Hey, I've had a mutual customer. I just wanted you to know here's something that they told me about what they so appreciated about you. In fact, I reminded them that, like myself, we live on referrals and they want to do a better job of sending you referrals. Talk about winning over a partner. What a great way to introduce yourself.
I'll give you one other little tip. And man, I think this still applies. When I was an originator, we didn't have Zoom or Teams. Frankly, we didn't have cell
That's
phones.
right.
Okay, that's how far back we go, right? So, point being is, most of my applications, the realtor was in the room with the customer, because I did mostly FHA, VA, first-time home buyers, that kind of thing, right? Or by phone. 100% of the time, I would look at the property the buyer was buying, and I would compliment the realtor to the buyer to say, I cannot believe they found you this kind of transaction, this kind of deal, right? This kind of property, whatever the case may be,
Yeah.
existing or new construction or a condo, whatever the case may be. Unbelievable value you're getting through the expertise of Randell here, my friend, the realtor. I will guarantee you, because people told me this later, they would bring me customers just to hear me say nice things about them.
Exactly right.
Right. Because it was a reinforcement to them, reinforcement to the customer. The customer now thought, by the way, I didn't lie to anybody. If I thought it was a really problematic property, we'd have those conversations. But finding the right transaction for that buyer is the essence of how the realtor gets paid and why they earn a commission. And to be able to reflect back, to the degree you have an agent on the phone, on a Zoom call, in person, whatever the case may be, with the customer,
Right.
take those couple of minutes and compliment the agent to the buyer face to face. You'd be shocked the number of times people will come back just to hear you say nice things. Right.
Exactly. Cross compliment, to your
Right.
point. People are looking for cross compliment because it also makes the client feel better when they hear that you're a great loan officer, and likewise when they hear that they've got the best realtor in town.
Right. Randell, we've got about 4 or 5 minutes left here on today's call. Plus, if you want to stay after for any Q&A, if we have any, what out of all of your conversation today, what parting comments do you want to share with the audience? Things that you think are takeaways? I'll lead by saying, look, this fate piece, we'll make sure we have a little document up in the community center today on fate, on the 4 letters of fate, and kind of regurgitating what Randall's talked about. What parting comments would you have to a rep, to a sales leader today about 2025, about execution, about getting off and actually implementing some of the ideas that you brought forth today?
I don't think it's anything that they haven't already said, so I'm going to keep reiterating it. Shant will say that people always ask him, and Jeremy gets the same thing, and we all get the same thing, like, what's the magic? And the magic is doing these things with discipline. Obviously, going into this next year when there is less volume, obviously there's a lot less loan officers as well, as we see more and more get out of the business. But what ultimately we need to be looking to do is then be the best. And so we've got to, since we spend a lot of time to get those referrals, we've got to continue to work towards more capture, greater pull through. And that means perfecting the process, which is why you want to do an audit of yourself and look at that. There's another piece to the deck that you have that you provided that I gave you, Brian, and it's talking about the 10 questions. So we all know that people call and rate shop on a regular basis. Be the best person that has ever answered their rate shopping questions. How? By teaching them what questions they should be asked. That way you can take some of the gamesmanship out of it. My father's been a well-decorated salesperson, and he told me early on, son, either play the game or learn to educate and expose the game, and then be the one that they trust. And that's what he wanted me to do. And that's where the 10 questions come in that are also part of the deck, and people can read through that.
That sounds like
and see that for
selling.
themselves.
I don't know. I've heard that phrase.
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly. I've got the book actually behind me in my office here on my wall.
For those of you who aren't aware, that's one of Todd's many books, I Trust Selling. But look, I think you talk about 10 questions. Just another tip, and we can put
Correct.
this. It may already be up on our community site, and if not, I'll have Maria put it up today. One of the things I had a guy that worked for me in New Jersey. He's in his 80s. He's still an originator, by the way, because he loves the business. Tony Anzavino.
Yeah.
One of the funniest guys I've ever worked with. He had this great strategy. He had a question. He had 10 questions. He would say to his prospects, to the leads, I know you're going to talk to my competition. Let me help you by giving you 10 questions that you should ask every one of those competitors when you're on the phone. And these are really simple things. What's the minimum down payment on an FHA loan, and how do you calculate it? What's an index on an ARM loan? How does it relate to the margin to determine my new rate going forward, right? What's the number on the back of a VA certificate of eligibility? What does that number mean? How does it reflect to me if I'm a veteran, right? The process. Really simple stuff. Here's the thing. Here's the magic. 90+% of originators in our business today cannot answer many of those questions. They either have to put the customer on hold and ask somebody, or they're going to go ask their underwriter, or they're going to ask their boss or whatever. And what it did, of course, is it cemented the idea that Tony was the pro. He was the knowledge. He was the guide through the swamp of home ownership, right? And virtually 100% of the time, the customer would go away. And in the old days, he'd fax it to the customer because we didn't have email, right? You could, very simple today, to have a PDF just to email it out to the customer and give it to them. Ask these questions of my competition, and then you decide whether or not you want to do business with me. Customers would call back, when can you come out to the house? When can we schedule an appointment, right? Because now price was secondary, knowledge was primary, trust was everything. Now the transaction began, right, in the process. So having the 10 questions to give away to your customer, and you can make these 10, you know your market, you know the type of questions or things that consumers are going to ask in your market. Have those 10 questions, give them out to the customers. Maria,
That's exactly right.
come back to you one more time to see if we have any additional questions in the chat or with hand raising.
Yeah, we actually have two. So here's the first one. So what is the number one lesson you've learned as a leader?
That's a, oh man, that's a session of the weekly roadmap right there. But go ahead, Randall, I'll let you.
Be a good listener, ultimately, because if you have smart people around you, as we should, then they're going to simply help you then become even smarter. So it's, I guess another way of saying is be humble. A lot of people kind of joke and say, because I have a large family, I probably have learned that myself, but it's amazing to me how quickly people think they know what they're doing. But I have said, I love it when I find out I'm wrong on something, because now I've learned something new. And people are looking just to be heard. You know, it's Lenciini's book talking about people don't want it their way. They just want to be heard. And when they're heard, then they know that ultimately the best decision is being made because their comments were factored into it. That's what I would say.
One of the questions I saw was, you mentioned a book earlier about influence. Somebody said, what was the book? Can you restate the book? And by the way, I'm going to put my entire reading list up in the community site. Maria Lane and I are working on that section right now to give people ideas. I don't read as much as I used to, because I used to travel a lot. And so on planes, I would read all the time. I do it mostly by audiobooks now when I'm working out, or when I'm on a plane, or whatever the case may be. But you mentioned a book earlier. Could you restate the book and the author for everybody?
It's called Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion, and that is by Robert Cialdini.
Great.
And he talks about the 6 psychological needs, reciprocity, like always give somebody something and they feel a need to kind of give back. Yeah, exactly.
The guy who taught me how to sell in the mortgage business, he had a view. His answer for agents: give value, give value, give value, give value, give value, ask. But start by giving value, not, hey, look, how do I make more money, right? How do I help you make more money? If I can do.
And it's not manipulation. It's not about manipulation.
No.
It's about connecting with people. There's a book, Crush Price. I know maybe you've had him on your show before, but there's excellent. There's a quote in there: the more value I build up front, the less important price becomes on the back.
No doubt.
And that's exactly what we've been talking about.
Yeah. Maria Elena, other questions in the chat?
Yeah, absolutely. So now there's a few more. So active listening, what you were mentioning, Randall, I'm sure that plays into this next question, which is, what's your most effective strategy for building trust and winning over clients in a highly competitive situation?
You know, I was talking earlier about giving back. One of the things I did is I was part of a neighborhood mediation group where we would do neighborhood mediations. And that was so valuable, especially for those of us in sales who like to do a lot of talking. And what it taught you was active listening, mirroring back what they say. So that was the first thing we were taught: mirror back what they say, and ultimately make sure that you're writing things down so that they see that you're taking it seriously, that you're remembering it, and then find the solutions ultimately. That gives the trust. There's a number of other little things as well when you talk about body language and so on. I remember one couple, they were scared to death. They had immigrated over. This was their first home. They were older, first-time home buyers. I rolled my sleeves up when I sat down with them, and they happened to see my kids. I'm usually an energetic guy, and my kids had gotten me a Tigger watch, and I still remember the folks saying, "He's got a Tigger watch," and they laughed and they said, "I think we can trust him," because I was down to earth with them. One of the things we do in this business is we start using all these terms and we go over their head. And it's one thing to be a professional and knowledgeable. It's another thing and an issue when we start using terminology that they don't understand. So we have to keep it on their level and make sure we continue to say, does that make sense to you? And is there anything that I just said that you'd like clarification on? Give them that permission.
Rialena, other questions?
Yes. So, are there any personal habits that you find successful that has helped you grow as a leader?
What Brian's already mentioned so much of them, atomic habits. Brian, I know some of the stuff you've talked about, the Todd Duncans, there's so much good material out there. All we have to do is copy what other successful people have done. I would say for myself, even this past year and some things that I changed, was realizing the power of just incremental small changes. Too many times we think we have to make a massive change, but small changes can make such of a significant difference. And ultimately, here's another thing from a leader perspective that I learned years ago is when I would identify something I wanted to help someone with as I'm doing coaching with them, and I would say, here's something specific I really want you to get better on. But I would also say, here's something you're really good at that I want to learn from you. And that helped it become more of a symbiotic relationship and a trust relationship where they knew we both had something to learn, because we all do. Everyone has something of value and a strength, and all of us have weaknesses as well.
I'll give you 2 cents from me. Look, and you touched on it already, Randall, the idea of humility and self-acceptance of where you are, right? For me, getting back to the gym, there was a time in my life I could bench press 375, several reps. I was a beast. I go back in the gym 7, 8 months ago, and my capacity to lift had gone over the last 50 years, right? And I just had to accept the fact I wasn't that guy anymore. And I just was where I was. And now I've made a lot of incremental gain. And it doesn't matter the old benchmarks. It only matters the new benchmarks of continuous improvement. So sometimes you got to give yourself a break, and self-acceptance, right, of where you are and then build from there is maybe the most important thing. And so wherever your weaknesses are, whatever you're not great at, is self-acceptance, and then try not to cure everything overnight, right? Try to think about the things that are most important to you in your life personally, maybe with your family, whatever the case may be. And in your professional life, is there one thing, is it time blocking? You mentioned the thinking chair. That's a great metaphor, right? I applaud Todd on that. Have a place where I have a sitting room in my master suite upstairs. It's my favorite place in the house because I can get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and sit in there for a few minutes, catch up on my emails, catch up on the markets, whatever the case may be, because I'm West Coast, so the markets are running already, and I can get some commentary. But it allows me to think and prepare for my day, right? To get my to-do list put together. I'm not flawless at it, but have a place and a process where you get to reflect on self audits. What's it for the day? What's the one thing you want to work on this month, right? Start small.
And Brian, can I just add, as a word of encouragement, the greatest growth comes after the greatest humility.
Yeah, absolutely.
Boy, have I learned that. And like a Sean, as big as he is, to hear him ask a question of when I was hearing other people asking questions, and he would ask them, how do you do this? Boy, that's great. I'm going to write that down. We all can learn ultimately, and we have to be willing to acknowledge that.
Exactly. Other questions, Marielena?
No, not at this time.
Well, look, first of all, Randall, I can't thank you enough for doing this on fairly short notice. You're a great launch on the mindset process. Todd's on. We're going to have Todd on the 7th to talk about mindset and some tactics as well. So we're excited for that. I'm going to continue a series. As I mentioned, I'll put some speakers out. I appreciate you staying a little past the top of the hour. And for those of you, we'll make sure that Randall's contact information is available to you as well if you want to reach out. I'm going to bring in a series of, as I mentioned, top production leaders, top producers, top heads of production, top CEOs, and others in the industry to talk, so you get multiple different perspectives. Here's what my experience has been. the most successful people have a commonality. It's personal humility. It's a personal accountability. It's reflection. It's some of the things that you've touched on today, Randall. I'm going to kind of pound away at that over the first part of this year because I think mental toughness. I had Captain Charlie Plum on last year, the
Oh yeah.
longest held
Oh
prisoner
yeah.
in the Vietnam War, to talk about mental toughness. Right? You listen to his story, and you're embarrassed if you ever complain about your life again. Right?
That's exactly right.
And so that kind of an approach can be very helpful. And for those of you who lead others, I think this is your highest obligation, is to help people through this mental mindset game. Randall, thank you again.
Thank
Great
you.
presentation. We have your materials up. People will have them available in the deck. For those of you who hung in till the end, thank you for that. And we look forward to seeing you on the road. And we'll see you next Friday on the Weekly Roadmap. Thank you,
It
Randall.
was a privilege. Thank
All
you,
right.
Brian.
Have a great day. Have a great week, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.